Hello, and welcome back to the Poetry Pea. I'm Patricia, and today we're diving deeper into the art of tanka poetry. If you enjoyed last week's episode on the 10 styles of poetry, I hope you'll love this one because it's all about the practical tips, some writing challenges, and examples to help you craft tanka that really shine. If you're new here, this podcast is generally all about haiku, senryū, haibun, and tanka, Japanese short-form poetry in English, with prompts, exercises, and inspiration to keep your poetry practice moving forward. Do follow us on whatever platform you listen to us, or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. So we're getting ready to read your tanka in October 2025. And I hope by the end of this podcast, you'll be well on the way to being prepared to submit tanka to us. What? You've missed the deadline? Well, try our exercises anyway. They'll help you write a superior poem. And of course, we're not the only place that accepts tanka. And while I have your attention, don't forget to check out the Poetry Pea video prompt on our YouTube channel for yet another opportunity to submit your work to the podcast and be featured in the Poetry Pea Journal. This is important though. We only accept submissions for the video prompt via YouTube. You can leave as many haiku or senryū as you like in the comments section. As I said, today's podcast will help you write a superior poem. I know, right? That's a considerable promise, isn't it? But I think you're up to it. And hopefully I am too. Let's use Teika's idea of a superior poem, so we have something to aim for. First up, he does mention that you can't develop the superior poem without intuition and experience. But according to him, a superior poem is a poem that appears spontaneously as a result of discipline and practice. It has an intensity of feeling, something that's going to resonate with your reader, although you should be careful not to be overly sentimental. And the superior poem is something that is more than the words on the page to your reader. And you know that yourself, don't you? When you read something really good, you have a vision in your head, a feeling in your gut. It's just, you know it's something special. The poem should be original in its treatment of the subject. No cliches at Poetry Pea, please. And the language of the poem should be in balance. Teika said, "In language there are strong words and weak, thick ones and thin. It's extremely important in composing your poems that you distinguish carefully amongst your words and be consistent, following strong words with strong ones, putting weak words together with weak, mulling your composition over again and again so that it's neither too thick nor too thin, but smooth and flowing and not displeasing to the ear." He was of the opinion that there were no bad words, but we do need to choose appropriate language for our poem. For example, if we're writing what he called a demon-quelling poem, we wouldn't choose gentle words and phrases. They'd be harsh to match the intent of the poem. He said, "The language used to express our concepts should be like two wings of a bird." The poem's meaning will be subtle but clear. Ambiguity, Teika maintains, is a skill that only the most accomplished poets have. So please, if you do try it, what I would suggest is leave your poem in your notebook, on your phone, wherever you've written it, a couple of days and then go back to it. If it still feels right to you, then okay, give it a whirl. But as I've said to you before, so many times I've written that sort of ambiguous poem, gone back to it a few days later and just haven't got a clue what I was trying to achieve with it, in which case I bin it, or at least strike it through, so I can see it and maybe come back to it another time. Your poem, your superior poem, will have a pleasing rhythm. It'll be smooth and flowing, with, of course, the possible exception of that demon quelling style. Remember the admonition by senryū that a poem should be composed so that it seems to glide as smoothly as a drop of water rolling down the length of a 5-foot iris leaf. And part of that, of course, is getting the cadence right. Speak it out loud so you can hear and actually you can feel the rhythm. And what are we going to be avoiding in a superior poem, of the tanka variety anyway? Obscurity. I've sort of mentioned that. So many poems arrive in my inbox that I honestly haven't got the faintest idea what they're about. And I know from my interaction with other editors that they are currently seeing quite a bit of that in their inboxes. We don't want to see an excessive refinement of the language or overblown language. Remember, your poem should be written in the words that we use every day, not highfalutin stuff. Don't want any of that. That won't resonate with your normal reader, or it's unlikely to. And it shouldn't have an unnatural use of language. And maybe an example of this in English tanka is the removal of articles when they would be naturally used. I think often people do that because they're counting syllables. Don't count the syllables. If an article needs to be there, put it in. And now for some tangible, practical advice. So my first piece of advice is, if you haven't listened to last week's podcast, do go back and listen to it, where I talked about Teika's 10 styles of poetry. That's your starting point. I'll read them quickly through for you so you're sort of back at the starting point. So the 4 fundamentals that you need to get right, he said, were mystery and depth, appropriate statement, elegant beauty, and deep feeling. And then his remaining styles were the lofty style, visual description, clever treatment, novel treatment, exquisite detail, and our old friend, the demon quelling treatment. So, how are we going to write this superior poem? According to Teika, anyway. Well, as I said before, practice makes perfect. You write and refine until you have something you're happy with, taking care that you don't do so much editing that you've lost the concept of the original poem. That can happen. He also suggests reciting various possibilities over and over, and something should emerge from your musings. If you remember, he comes from an era when poems were spoken aloud. That was the natural thing to do. Not so natural for us, but I think we should get back to it. I do it when I'm out on my bike, cycling about in the woods. Obviously, I can't write anything down while I'm cycling, so I recite the possibilities in my head until something makes me stop and write it down, because I'm happy with it. I'm very lucky I don't come across too many people when I'm out cycling in the woods. Just imagine the sight of this woman mumbling away to herself and pedalling her very fastest. As I said, when I have something I like, I just stop for a minute and record it. I guess it could work by just writing it down, but honestly, I'm with Teika. Reciting is the clear winner for me. And from all this practice you're going to be doing, You should be able to find your voice and your style. Try them all, but realize that some of them just might not be for you. Don't force yourself to write in a style that isn't natural, because I'm fairly certain, based on my own attempts, that the results will not be exceptional. No way it's going to be a superior poem. So what are we looking for in a tanka? What am I looking for? What are the team looking for when you send them to us? I'm looking for us to get the basics right. And in this instance, I'm looking for a 5-line poem taking the form short, long, short, long, long when you write the lines. We'll talk about lineation another time because there are definitely other possibilities. But traditionally, we've been told to write that 5, 7, 5, 7, 7, and 31 syllables. But that's not going to fly in English language tanka. I've talked about why not many times over the years, so I'm not going to drone on about it now. Just keep that 5-line short, long, long form in your head when you're writing. And according to Dennis M. Garrison, the tanka is 5 phrases on 5 lines. And he says of these phrases that it's essential they be cohesive, not just a list of 5 things. They should be integrated into a unified poem. With, he says, the 5th line being the strong line, the strongest line. And it's a poem of 2 parts. How do we create that 2-part poem? Well, I will tell you, but before I go on, I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who supports Poetry Pea through our membership scheme. Your support means we can keep producing the podcast, running the journal, and offering prompts and challenges that help poets around the world improve their craft. If you'd like to support us too and get access to extra show notes and resources, do consider signing up. It not only keeps the community alive, it also tells the algorithms that Poetry Pea is worth recommending to more poets like yourself. If you haven't joined us already, head over to Buy Me a Coffee. There's a link on the website. But I know not everyone can afford a regular subscription. So maybe you could buy us a coffee from time to time and spread the word about us via social media. I honestly don't have the time to do as much social media as I'd like. Not if you want podcasts like this. So if you could help me out on the socials, that would be mega. Thank you very much. Anyway, back to the poetry. How are we going to create that 2-part poem? I've got some examples for you, you'll be pleased to know. And the first examples show 2 images juxtaposed. Have a listen. The black negligee that I bought for your return hangs in my closet. Day by day plums ripen and are picked clean by birds. In this poem by Chula, we have the contrast of the new, sexy, beautiful negligee bought in hope, with the idea of the plums aging on the tree and being consumed by the birds. Hope versus disappointment. A beautiful image versus a sad old one. And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that to further emphasize the contrast, the poet has indented the final 2 lines about the plums. Notice also that the poet has indeed written 5 phrases which fit together nicely. You possibly wouldn't notice that unless you were really analysing it. And as I read it again, think about the language. Is it appropriate for the subject? Listen to the sound of the words. I'd be really interested to know your thoughts, because on the page, picked clean might stand out as a strong image, but when I read it aloud, maybe not so much. Anyway, lots to think about. The black negligee that I bought for your return hangs in my closet. Day by day plums ripen and are picked clean by birds. By Margaret Chula. Four black mournful men she never knew or met carry her away. In the dreary street, fading the sound in paradisum. Four black mournful men she never knew or met carry her away. In the dreary street, fading the sounds in paradisum. Piet Dietze. In this poem, we still have the two images, not contrasting this time, but comparable in their melancholy dreariness. This time, Dietze has employed strong visuals as well as the senses. The sound of In Paradisum, a requiem piece. If you're not familiar with it, I'll add a link to the King's College Choir singing it. What was I saying about hitting your reader in the gut? I think this does it very successfully. And while we're looking at poems that use comparison in the juxtaposition, I have this one for you. A sudden loud noise. All the pigeons of Venice at once fill the sky. That is how it felt when your hand accidentally touched mine. Ruby Spriggs. When I read it again, think about the content. I ask myself if perhaps in writing a more or less traditional poem, did Spriggs use too many words? Are all her words necessary? If you're looking at the slide on YouTube, would you have changed the lineation? Look at line 4. If Spriggs had written a free verse, would the poem be different? Would it be more poetic? Would you make edits? And if so, what would they be? And one last thing. Notice that the first 3 lines could well be a standalone haiku, couldn't they? A sudden loud noise. All the pigeons of Venice at once fill the sky. That is how it felt when your hand accidentally touched mine. Ruby Spriggs. Just out of earshot, the periodic blinking of a night airplane, not quite far enough away to be as close as the stars. Gerald St. Maur. I wanted to read you this one as an illustration of the juxtaposition of an image and a response to that image, which you may have also noticed in the previous poem. The first 3 lines are senryū-like, objective, whilst the final 2 lines show subjectivity, which is often seen in tanka. In this case, the final 2 lines are a personal response to the first 3. Just out of earshot, the periodic blinking of a night airplane, not quite far enough away to be as close as the stars. Gerald St. Maur. And another example. Lines stretch away from Canyonland power plants to the far city. Do you remember when we could see across this valley? Lines stretch away from Canyonland power plants to the far city. Do you remember when we could see across this valley? Kenneth C. Leibman. Now let's think about a simple pivot. There are many ways to create a pivot, but today I want to keep it simple. As Teika would say, let's master the fundamentals. And in this case, the fundamental is a pivot in line 3, so that line 3 applies equally to the first two and the final two lines. We crowd together under the canopy at the gravesite, a sudden storm of golden leaves. We crowd together under the canopy at the gravesite, a sudden storm of golden leaves. Francine Porad. Winter comes, I move from place to place house-sitting. Strange keys wearing holes in the pockets of my jeans. Winter comes, I move from place to place. House-sitting, strange keys wearing holes in the pockets of my jeans. Dennis H. Dutton. I had a real devil of a job finding good tanka that had pivots. So I'm hoping you're going to increase the number of good poems out there with that third line pivot. Jane Reichhold suggests that the juxtaposition between two parts of a tanka allows the poet to make a switch. What sort of switch? Let's take a look at some examples. Our first one from Julie Bloss Kelsey is a switch in time. Reading notes we passed in high school, 30 years later, I'm still asking you the same questions. Reading notes we passed in high school, 30 years later, I'm still asking you the same questions. There's a pivot in that one, isn't there? Anyway, the point of it was to notice how Julie switches the tenses in her poem. We passed the notes in the past. I'm still asking you in the present. Reading notes we passed in high school, 30 years later, I'm still asking you the same questions. Julie Bloss Kelsey. Michelangelo tapped his Moses on the knee. Arise and walk. I kissed the cherry red mouth on the canvas. Michelangelo tapped his Moses on the knee. Arise and walk. I kissed the cherry red mouth on the canvas. Francine Porad. Lots of tenses in that one to think about. But additionally, that switch in time allows us to write fantasy poem, which I think the Michelangelo poem strays into. You might disagree. The other thing that this Michelangelo poem demonstrates is a switch in place. I don't know about you, but when I read it, the first part about Michelangelo tapped his Moses on the knee, arise and walk, took me to Rome. But the last two lines, I kissed the cherry red mouth on the canvas, took me back to Porad's artist studio. I have another poem that illustrates the change, the switch in place and time. At Raleigh Station, the striding girl's nipples through her sweater. Years ago in Stockholm, that summer of no brassiers. You don't hear that word braziers too much now, do you? At Raleigh Station, the striding girl's nipples through her sweater. Years ago in Stockholm, that summer of no braziers. Kenneth C. Leibman. You can also switch the person within the poem, like in this example where the plural is switched to the singular. Discussing the vacant lot next door with potential buyers, my spouse draws attention to the poison ivy. Do you think that switch adds a bit of tension? For me, it sort of acts like a zoom does on your camera on your phone to that poison ivy. And it made me wonder, was there some subtle meaning in those lines about the poison ivy? Still thinking about it. Discussing the vacant lot next door with potential buyers, my spouse draws attention to the poison ivy. Johan Klontz. You could also change direction in the poem, as we do with haiku, and I've got one from Jane Reichold, which illustrates that. A wet road flowing into sky at the top of the hill. Twin lights appear to descend. A friend is coming to visit. A wet road flowing into sky at the top of the hill. Twin lights appear to descend. A friend is coming to visit. Or this one by Okuma Nobayuki, translated by Ueda. The cry of battle rises up towards the sky. The surrounding police troop rest on the grass. The cry of battle rises up towards the sky. The surrounding police troop rest on the grass. So, as you've heard, there are lots of techniques you can use to create those two parts of the poem we're looking for. You may have noticed that some of the poems don't adhere to the short, long, long form that I'm asking you to write. Perhaps we'll go totally freestyle next time we write tanka, but this time I think we're still learning. And we're learning our lessons from one of the Wacom masters, Teika. So when you write, please stick to the form I've asked for. You don't have to go with 57577 and 31 syllables, because as I said, that doesn't fly in English. Although, if one just by happy circumstance turns out like that, please send it. Now, I want us to have a look at an exercise to try before that submission window opens. I have a 15-day tanka challenge for you. I'm going to put the details in the show notes. I'm not going to go all the way through it today. I'm going to take you through day one, just to get the juices flowing, and then you can go to the show notes and see what comes after. So in day one, I want you to practice the 5-line structure, you know, that short, long, long. Choose one of Teika's fundamental styles and write a tanka about your day, or something that you do often because you enjoy it, using at least one of these techniques: juxtaposition of two concrete images, juxtaposition of an image and a subjective thought stroke comment, a pivot in line 3, a switch in time between the two parts of the poem, a switch between reality and fantasy, switch of persona in the poem between a single person and lots of people, sense of movement between the two parts of a poem, and maybe a switch in place. Think of two concrete images and how you might have been feeling at the time you saw them. What can you write using these initial thoughts? I'll go first. My thoughts were about when I do Tai Chi up at the old pond, you know, the one with the frogs in it. And often when I'm there, at least sort of spring, early summertime, there's a mother duck swimming about with her ducklings in the pond. It's such a lovely image, fresh and hopeful. So anyway, when I was thinking about that, I came up with this. Misty sunrise, white crane spreads its wings, its shadow. A mother mallard pilots her paddling of ducklings. Misty sunrise, white crane spreads its wings, its shadow. A mother mallard pilots her paddling of ducklings. For those of you not watching this presentation on YouTube, I've punctuated the poem with an M dash at the end of line 3 because I wanted to highlight a longer pause at that point. And I wanted to just say to you, don't be afraid to punctuate your poetry. Sometimes I think punctuation is an underutilized tool. As to this poem, I've probably jumped ahead to Teika's idea of visual description, but I've also tried to use appropriate statement with, I hope, a pinch of elegant beauty. I think I've got the cadence, but if I'm honest, I'm not happy with the final lines. Does it bring the emotion into the poem that I want you as my reader to have? Does it have that deep feeling that Teika said should be in all our poems? I'm not sure. I do know that I have some editing to do. So now, having heard what I expect or what I'm challenging you to do on day 1, you've got an idea of what's coming, and I'll put the rest of the challenge in the show notes for you to follow. And at the end of the exercise, I really hope, I'm pretty certain you will, have some tanka that you can send to us for submission. I've also got some other exercises you can have a go at. Michael Dillon Welsh's sensory 5-day exercise and Jane Reichel's lessons, which talk about the twist, the switch in the tanka. Stay with me. I want to bring you a couple more poems before I head off into the wild blue yonder, because I'd hate for my unedited effort to be the last one you hear today. And I also have a couple more things for you to think about before you press the submit button. So the first thing I want to talk to you about, again, is punctuation. I mentioned that I used it in my little poem, and I think it's something we don't use enough. Why should we use it? Well, it does help guide your reader as to where you want the pauses and indicates the rhythm you want in your poem. I listen to my wife trying the Beethoven. Her head sways to the rhythm, her hand tightly in mine. By Sanford Goldstein. If you're not watching this on YouTube, can you guess, or did you guess where the punctuation is? I listen to my wife trying the Beethoven. Her head sways to the rhythm, her hand tightly in mine. And I've said it before multiple times, but please think about the language you use. Make it balance with the topic you choose to write about. Harsh topics, harsh words. Gentle topics, more gentle words. And, as I've said before, think about strong words with strong words. Weak words with weak words. And because tanka are more emotional than haiku, it's very, very easy to over-egg the pudding with your language. Keep it simple, a little bit emotive, but don't go overboard. Streams race on both sides of the street, bearing flotsam. Beer can versus sodden doll. Which will pass me first? Streams race on both sides of the street, bearing flotsam. Beer can versus sodden doll. Which will pass me first? By Peter Larson. Did you enjoy the language in that? I did. And something we haven't really covered, but you can call on all your sensory experiences to write tanka. And Michael Dillon Welsh's exercise might be useful for that. Coming back to my home village with my little brother, every night listening to the frogs, we fall asleep. Coming back to my home village with my little brother, every night listening to the frogs, we fall asleep. Mekawa Samio, translated by Leith Morton. What do you fall asleep listening to? With me, classical music. Current favourite, Donizetti. It might be fairly obvious from what you've heard today, and it's really not obligatory, but as Tuaramachi noted, virtually all tanka are written in the first person. That is, from your perspective as the poet. Although not thick enough to be called hatred, there's some opaque liquid accumulating in my chest. Although not thick enough to be called hatred, there's some opaque liquid accumulating in my chest. Sawaramachi, translated by Ueda. As an aside, I absolutely love the language she's used, or maybe that Ueda has chosen to translate this poem. It strikes me that there's a lot of strong words in there. Although not thick enough to be called hatred, there's some opaque liquid accumulating in my chest. I wonder if that's on its way to being demon quelling, because I can feel my anxiety rising as I read it. Okay, that's it for today. Have you filled a few pages of your notebooks with some ideas as I've prattled on? If you haven't, you can always go back and listen or watch it on YouTube so you can look at the slides. But what I do hope is that you are just itching to have a go at the exercises and you'll have written some fantastic, superior poems when the submissions open in October. You can write about any topic that creates an emotive response or reaction in you and which you think your reader might relate to. And remember to check out the show notes for all the links you need, remembering that I'll put the challenge in there, plus a couple more exercises for you to have a go at. ISA and Buson members will, of course, receive a rather more elaborate set of show notes in their email box as a thank you for their membership. And so, I wish you a very good day. And as you go about your day, don't forget, keep writing and maybe reciting those poems too. Until next week. Ciao.